Debbie, it's great to have you with me today. I'm excited to hear your journey in life. I know we touched a little bit about it when we spoke over the phone. And, I just want to say that we did connect with another podcaster named Jacqueline. So I appreciate her connecting us together to have you on here as well. So, Debbie, if you don't mind just starting out with, sharing with everybody who you are today and what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again for having me on your show. And thanks to Jacqueline for connecting us. Due to kind of the journey that we'll get into, where I am today is I actually work with parents. I help parents in a number of different ways. Parents that have a child with mental illness and addiction, or parents that have lost a child, because that's kind of my journey. And so that's where I feel really good about it being my purpose, about working with others who are going through something similar.
So let's dive into that then. So you obviously went through something like that, and that's how you're helping people. So can you share with us? I don't know if you want to go back to prior to something that happening, and then go from there.
Yeah. So actually, I'm a single mom of 3 kids, and now two grown and one has passed away. But my oldest son, Alex, when he was 17 years old, he came to me one day, and this was really what felt for me out of the blue, because this was a teenager who pretty much had a normal childhood. He did sports, like ever since he was a small child. He did soccer, and then it was travel soccer. Then in high school, it was track, varsity cross country. And he was very social, had many friends, and nothing stood out to me or his siblings that would have led to what he came to me with. And it was one Thanksgiving weekend, the day after Thanksgiving, and it was the evening, and I was in my room. And he came to me and he told me that he wanted to kill himself. And he talked in detail about his plan and how he would do it. And he actually admitted to attempting it. And as a mom, that was like so hard to hear. And inside, I was just screaming out. But outside, I knew that he came to me because he trusted me and he wanted to talk. And so I just stayed calm and quiet and listened to him so that he could say as much as he wanted to share. And this led to hospitalization for him. We were fortunate that we had a doctor who was on call all weekend, and she was able to call over to the psychiatric hospital that could take adolescents. And somebody from there called and did like a long call with him, kind of a pre-assessment. And I remember when we were heading to the hospital and waiting for him to be evaluated, he started talking to me about things that I had no idea were going on inside of him. He was talking about being paranoid that people were spying on him, putting sheets over top of the windows to his bedroom, being afraid to wear the hospital socks and slippers they gave him because somebody might be spying on him. There might be a camera in there. And he also apparently had been having some hallucinations as well. And this was really upsetting to me. And it was very stressful, this hospitalization, because in our family, we had never dealt with something like this. And he was there for 3.5 weeks. And within that time, they were able to give him a diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder. And at the time, I had no idea what that meant and what it was going to mean for the years to come, for me, for him, for my family. And I just knew that, like, I really wanted to try to find him like the best care that I could, the best psychiatrist, the best therapist, the best everything, so that he could have the most normal life that could be possible. And I remember they told me at the hospital that it would be a journey where it would take time to find the right medications that could help him. And even if we did find the right medications, that he would likely go on and off his medications during his life. And so they kind of warned me what I was in for. But in my mind, I thought, well, I'm just going to find him somebody really good who can really help him. And we did find some good people, but it was the road was much like the doctors described. And it took a while to find medications that didn't have too many side effects and that actually helped him and didn't make him worse. And once we did, it was always an up and down thing. He was on and off his meds. And probably within a year of that hospitalization, he started using drugs. And I think it just started with marijuana, but it quickly escalated to almost everything out there he had tried. And I remember there was 1 year, maybe a year after that hospitalization, he was in and out of the hospital basically every few months. And the following year, he was in and out of drug and alcohol rehab treatment centers 3 different times. And one of the times, his counselor called me on the phone and said that he and 3 other people there had driven to another state to buy heroin. And I remember that was the first time that I was aware that he was using such dangerous substances, and that was really scary. And this really led to a lot of difficulties. The next few years after that, there was a number of occasions where I almost lost him to a drug overdose. And that was really hard. There were, calls in the middle of the night that, he was brought into the hospital. He was in the ICU and they didn't know if he would make it. There were just a number of occasions, and it was really hard. And so I knew, there were so many sleepless nights for me early on in those first few years, and so much stress. And I think that's that part of my story in that it's a difficult thing to deal with, is kind of what, after losing him, kind of led me to want to help parents who are going through something similar. Because I did, not right away, but after a few years, I did figure out how to find more peace in my life, and how to be able to sleep, and how to be able to keep calm, and to not just live in this worry and in this what if, and, be able to really be present with him and my other children. And I had a really close relationship with him. It still wasn't easy. It's not easy to see somebody you love suffering from something so serious and being on and off drugs. And, in his 20s, many times he would put himself into treatment. He would decide, like, okay, enough is enough. This is getting out of hand, and I'm going to go and detox and go into treatment. And he'd get real excited and get serious about it. And, we were always really supportive. His brother, his sister, him, and myself, we were really, really close. And so we always were very supportive of every time he did go into treatment or did put himself in the hospital. But it was not an easy road. It was not an easy road at all.
Yeah. Can you share what, I forget the term you used for his diagnosis, but can you share what that was, what it means?
Yeah, so it's called schizoaffective disorder, and it's basically, it has things in common with schizophrenia and bipolar. So the hallucinations and the paranoid thinking was definitely related to the schizophrenia side, and then the bipolar contributes to the affective disorder. So it's the mood disorder, it's the depression and the mania. So he suffered more from the depression side than the manic but he could really go into either one.
Wow. And so he had that for his for a long time, I guess, and just never came out. Right.
Yeah, that's such a good question because he didn't. Well, if he had symptoms, he definitely kept them to himself. I don't think I don't think he had symptoms for a long time before this happened, just because it seemed like a lot of his symptoms were really difficult to live with. And it was his senior year that he came to me. It was early on in his senior year, and he had always been really active in sports, and everything seemed to be really normal. And I'm not sure. And he had a lot of friends, especially his friends were usually in the sports activities. And I don't think that he would have been able to function to the level that he did if he had a lot of those symptoms. So I don't think the symptoms were happening very long, but it's hard to say exactly how long. I don't actually really know.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's fine. Yeah, but he did open up eventually, when you were driving to the hospital or whatever.
Yeah, he started talking about more and more symptoms, and it was pretty scary.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to say, first of all, I'm sorry for your loss. And, I could tell, you're still emotional about this, which I understand completely. So I appreciate you sharing this with me and the listeners and whoever else you're sharing with outside of here. So, what kind of effect did it have on you and his siblings?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because it was you mean while he was in this process of
Going through it, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So going through it was definitely, I think, hardest on us in the beginning. Even though things got worse as time went on, I think it was hardest on us in the beginning because we didn't know how to deal with it. There wasn't like a manual. There wasn't like a book that like, this is what you need to do when your child is experiencing this, or from their perspective, when your older brother is experiencing this. And so I think the hardest thing was accepting it. And I know acceptance, this is what I always tell people, acceptance doesn't mean that you have to agree with it, right? It just means you're not fighting against reality. You're accepting that this is actually the way things are. This is what's happening. And so I think the acceptance process took a while. And the grieving process, a lot of people don't realize, but even though he was still living at that point, there is grief involved, because you're grieving who he was before the mental illness, and how life was, and maybe how life was you thought was going to be. I remember he was so into sports, and we were talking about him going to college and being on the track team, and I was reaching out to coaches to see what kind of time for a mile you needed to be on the team and that kind of thing. And so, I had hopes and dreams for him. I'm sure he had hopes and dreams for himself as well. He didn't ask for this. So it definitely impacted us. And in the later years before he passed away, when he was in his 20s, he had, I think what we figured is he had a lot of brain damage. It was probably a combination of the drugs, and he also had a seizure disorder, which was exacerbated by the drug use. And so when we would get together, we were a really close family, and he was really great, and he loved getting together with family, and he'd be really excited. But sometimes it was sad, because to see him in the way that he was, and struggling, and for your child, you want so much for them, like, you want the world for them, and it was sad to see him struggling.
I can imagine. So unfortunately, you lost him when he was in his 20s, or did he get to his 30s?
He was 26. And the interesting thing is that I guess the year or so, maybe a year or two before he passed away, he was definitely in and out of, it was over the pandemic, and he was in and out of treatment centers, and he was doing outpatient IOP, which is intensive outpatients. And he had a counselor that he really, really liked. And, there was a lot of positives. And I remember we all got together where I was living at my house. I was living out in the country at the time. And my younger son lived a little bit even further out one direction, and he lived not too far from my daughter and her boyfriend. And so we all got together where I was living on New Year's Day, and that was one of the first times in a long, long time that we remembered him being completely sober, like not on any drugs, not on alcohol, and actually pretty happy. And it was really nice to see him that way. It was a really uplifting experience, and we had no idea that was going to be our last time seeing him. And it was the winter time, New Year's Day. We all hugged goodbye, and a couple days later, there was a big snowstorm, and he was looking for a room to rent, and he had been staying in town because he walked everywhere since he had a seizure disorder. So he was staying in town at an extended stay hotel temporarily till he could find a room. And I was kind of paying each day, transferring him money each day, because it was really just a few days. His lease had just been up December 31st. And I remember talking to him Tuesday night, and he was really excited about a place, and he thought that once the snow melted, he could move in, and everything seemed really positive. And I was still snowed in, and I was without heat and power. And the next day, I didn't realize that morning that he hadn't texted me to ask for more money for the hotel. And I didn't realize till the afternoon. And I remember trying to reach him, and I couldn't reach him, which, there'd be many times I couldn't reach him. But this time I thought, well, he needs the money, so I don't know where he's staying. And his brother and sister hadn't heard from him, and we tried calling around to the hospital and the hotel, and the hotel said he checked out. And I thought, well, I don't know who he's staying with. He did have friends, and it was possible, but I was worried. But we didn't know. And it was the next morning, Thursday morning, that I received a call at 9 a.m, and the person identified himself as the county police officer, and he said, "I'm so sorry to do this over the phone, but with the snowstorm and you being so far away, I couldn't make it out there." And he said, "I'm so sorry, but your son was found dead in his hotel room." And that was like the hardest thing that I've gone through in my life. And I've been through some difficult stuff, but that was really hard. And it was also hard to tell his brother and sister because they were so close. I don't think a day went by when his brother and him weren't in communication, even though they lived 2 hours apart. They were always really close. So it was really hard. And in the beginning, I did most things from the comfort of my bed. I remember early on, I love following Tony Robbins, and I've learned so much from him. And at some point early on, something stuck in my mind saying, find somebody who's been through what you've been through and see what they did when they to come out the other side. And so I started reading memoirs that people had wrote who had lost a child. And then I kind of just gravitated to that lost a family member. And that was really helpful in the beginning. And then I was guided to open an email about a writing workshop. And this was only less than 2 months after he passed away, maybe about a month and a half. And so I remember thinking that I don't think I have the capacity to listen to something like this, but I was guided to do it anyway. And by the end of the 4-day workshop, it was with Hay House. I had signed up for their year-long writing program, and I knew that I was supposed to write a book to help to help parents who had been on a similar journey to mine. And it started the beginning of a whole soul searching process where just kind of rethinking of why am I here, and why am I here and he's not here? What's my purpose? And what I knew then is that it was to help others on a similar journey to mine, to be able to support them and help them to have peace in their life and have a closer relationship with their child, because I knew I had that, but I knew everybody else didn't necessarily. And so it was really, I was sure that that's exactly what I wanted to do. So I spent most of that first year writing my book and starting a Facebook group for parents, and kind of shifting my coaching practice to working with parents. And so it's been a journey for me.
Yeah. I can imagine. And I, I'm not a mother, but I know what I can see what it's like, because my father was one of 7, somewhat 6 or 7, something like that. Anyways, he was the first of my grandmother's children to go. And I forget the age, she probably in her 70s, but for her to be like telling the other kids, is it really him? Go to the hospital, find out, I mean, and that shook her, and unfortunately, I don't remember the exact year or whatever, but I think it was another year or two, she passed away. So I think it's, it was heartache, and then, she got cancer and stuff, but, and she was doing smoking and all that, but you could just see it in her face. You can feel it in her, how she was speaking. So I mean, I can only relate to what I saw. So to be a mother and, have children of your own, because that's what a mother does. Like, they nurture and then take care of the kids, and they want them to grow up to be the best they can be, yeah, that's tough. So so you're focusing on helping parents that have gone through this as well, like lost a child, right? So is it,
or still have a child with addiction or mental illness? So both.
okay. All right, that's cool. And is it, like 2 parents, or, I mean, do you find yourself, seeing single parents as well?
I've worked with both. It's some people have been single parents, some people have been still married. Mm-hmm. So it's been either way. I was a single parent myself, so I'm definitely happy to work with single parents.
Yeah, I didn't, because they have that partner, right? So they can kind of like talk to each other and feel for each other. So I don't know how's it work with like a single parent? I mean, especially if maybe they don't have that family available to them that they can open up to.
Well, I think, are you asking about if they've lost a child or if they still have a child with mental illness and addiction?
If you want to go both ways, we can talk about that.
So a lot of times when they have a child with mental illness and addiction, sometimes they're at odds as to how to handle it. Sometimes, especially if the child is still a teenager. So usually I work with parents that have a teen or adult child with mental illness or addiction. And so sometimes they're at odds as to how to handle it. And they're at odds with the child, and they're at odds with each other. And so I can come in and help them with that, and kind of see things in a different light as well, because sometimes what happens is they lose perspective of the illness versus who their child truly is, and not realizing that many times the behavior is because of the illness. And the things like if the child is lashing out or, going into a psychotic state, it can make them say and do and behave in certain ways. And they tend to take a lot of that in and take it personally, and it's really not personal. So sometimes helping them to see things in a different light can be helpful. And also kind of working with them. Sometimes they're just so stressed out and they don't know how to find peace, and they don't even, if they're married, they don't even have time for each other because the stress is like taking up their whole life. So they have like no room for anything else. And so working with them on how to let go of that fear and not live in the fear. I mean, the fear is there, but the thing is you don't have to live in the fear. You there's other ways you can live to have more peace. And so helping them to be able to do that. And with losing a child, grief is so individual. So everybody grieves different. And sometimes when you have a couple that's married, they may grieve in different ways. And like, as one person, you may think, oh, well, their grief doesn't look like mine. So maybe they are not feeling it, or they don't miss, our child. And so some people show their grief visually, and you can tell more, and they're upset, or they're crying, or they're in bed a lot, and you know it. And other people are the opposite. They're like getting back to their life. They want to hurry up and get back to their life. And on the outside, life looks normal, and they're doing normal things. And so sometimes that can actually drive a relationship apart, because they don't know, they don't realize that what they have in common is they both did love their child very much, and they both are grieving their child, just in different ways.
Yeah, I see that. So I mean, how does somebody connect with you, and for your help or whatever else you have to offer?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is debbiegailcoaching.com. And from there, you can send me a message. It has information on my book. It has information on my show. And I forgot to mention, I have a show that helps parents. I just started it. And that has information on everything. And I'm also on Facebook and Instagram at Debbie Gail Coaching.
Yeah. And what's the show about then?
So the show is to help both types of parents that either have a child with mental illness and addiction, or parents that have lost a child. And it's called Finding Peace Beyond the Pain. And it airs live Friday nights at 7 p.m. on Amazon Fire and Roku TV. And then the replays are uploaded to YouTube and most of the podcast platforms. So tomorrow will be the second episode. So there's only been one episode so far, but there's definitely information about it on my website, and how you can watch the replays, and how you can watch it live. And there's plenty of information.
That's cool. Is it just you, or you have people come on and talk too?
So I have people come on. The first episode, I actually had my daughter come on as a guest, because what I did is I shared my story, and she shared her story as a sibling growing up with an older brother with mental illness and addiction. So we both talked about that. And like this coming week, we have a guest who is a psychiatrist, and she's worked in a psychiatric hospital unit with adolescents and young adults with mental illness. And so she's going to come on and talk about what parents can expect when there is a hospitalization for your child, and how to support them, and all kinds of things. And there's also an opportunity for parents to call in. There's a call-in line to ask questions. And I'm going to have various guests. So I know I have a substance abuse counselor. I have a grief expert. I have parents who are going to share their stories, parents who have lost a child. I have parents who have a child with a serious drug addiction. So I've got a number of variety of guests.
That's great. That's cool. I'm glad to hear that, and that it's taken off for you.
Thanks.
Yeah, sure. So I have a question I ask everybody at the end, and what are 3 key things you've learned and used along your journey?
Okay. One is that to be present, because life is precious, and we never know how long somebody else has, and we don't want to miss out on that moment. And when we're too much in the future, worrying about the future, or worrying about something in the past, we're not present, and we're not able to enjoy our child. So being present is definitely one of the big ones. Another one is that I love this saying by Tony Robbins, and I try to use it. And it is, life is happening for us, not to us. And I love it because it takes us out of that victim mode. Like, I feel like when you say life is happening to you, you're playing the victim. And when you're playing the victim, that's not a very empowering space to be in at all. And so it's, when you say that life is happening for you, even if you don't know how that is at the time, it just puts you in that more empowering state. So that would be the second one that I would say. And the third one is, the other thing that's helped me so much is to not prioritize the need for certainty. I discovered that I had this really high need for certainty, for life to happen the way I wanted to happen on my terms. And that was responsible for a lot of my living in fear early on, the first few years after my son's diagnosis. And when I was able to substitute that with something like contribution or growth and focus on those things more, it didn't mean you don't have the need for certainty, but not to prioritize it so much. That really helped me a lot in my journey.
Those are three great ones. And I know I smiled on the second one when you were saying it. It's because it took me a while to figure that out for my journey as well. And, when you start using 4 instead of 2, after a while, it clicks in. It takes a while, but it clicks in, right?
It does. Yeah. It just puts you in that more empowering state. Like, I figured out you don't have to know at that moment, how it's happening for you, but you have to believe it so that you're in a more empowered space.
Yeah. It's hard in the beginning, right? And then, but if you keep on saying it or you keep on hearing it, you're like, yeah, you're right. This is happening for me for this reason. Like, you didn't see something else. And there was something else going on or whatever, right? And now you can experience life being present, and it's happening for you, and you can grow from that. So awesome. I love them all. I appreciate you coming on, Debbie, and sharing that, your journey in life. And I'm excited for you and your show. And I'm looking forward to seeing that take off for you. I'll have to check in and see how it's going for you.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much for having me as a guest.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.